Let's start by a little check-in as to where we're at with being in stride with our IDs and our true selves. So you can put your score in the chat. You can talk about it. You can put in an emoji, whatever is your, way of expressing how you are in stride. Feel free to contribute that, and we'll spend a little bit of a few moments just talking it through. I'm always glad I remember to do this because on the few occasions that occasionally, if they have a meeting and like even with clients and we don't do it, there's people call us out on it. They say, "Oh, you didn't do the check-in." I was looking forward to, I had something I wanted to share, whether it's good or bad. It's a really popular exercise, this exercise with a lot of the groups that we work with. All right. Welcome, Patricia. Thanks for your note. Nice to have you on the call again.
Nice
Even
to
though
be here.
you can hear okay. Good on you. Good on you. All right. So Um, anyone want to talk to their score?
I'm happy to talk to my score. It's an 8, and I typically have an 8. And I guess talk to a couple of strategies that work really well for me, because it's easy to be in stride when it's just everything's going well, but it's not always that everything is going well. So 2 simple things I do where I sort of feel that I'm being pulled out of stride. One with my use verify, it's very simple, focus on what I can control. And then bringing in my avoid authenticate, which is that the need for leverage is finding the positive in every situation. And they're the 2 things that really help to keep me in stride when things are pulling me out of stride. Not saying that that's occurring right now, but that typically can occur every day or 2.
So how does that work? You hear a lot of people say that, Julianne, about, oh, I focus on what I can control and what, don't worry about what you can't. How does that really work? Like
Well, it's interwoven with the finding the positive in every situation as well. The 2 come together. And I think that's the big thing for me is I always, no matter what the circumstances, I just default to what are the positives here? What can I get out of this? So it's like it comes as a package. It's not one in isolation. And yeah, and it's just rejigging because there's just some things you just can't control, you can't change. So, it's then working within the parameters that one needs to work within. If I can influence, I'm going to go there first. Yeah.
so when you
Answer
can,
it a bit
you're
more
just
clearly?
consciously reframing to find the positives in
I
whatever.
totally go to that every time. What's the positive in this situation? Yeah. And
Okay.
that I think comes from the leverage drive. For different drives, it will come from different places. You can still be doing the same thing behaviorally, but yeah.
Well, and it's interesting that in your case, you talk about them very equally, but your drives you can see there with your ID, they're equal. The verify and the avoid authenticate are equal intensity. So it sort of makes sense that they're of equal need,
Yeah.
for you. And as you say, they sort of go together. Thank you for sharing. Anybody else? The
Well,
scores aren't gone. So
I think that, I was doing the PPI check this morning and digging into the form and the strategies based upon, some of the reasons why I may not be in stride. And I think for me, to Julian's call out there, when I don't feel in control, what is it that I can control? And to the coaching strategies and tips inside the platform, I can control my mindset, right? And I think that's just really, really critical when you're working to build something new and you're in the midst of some change. It's that mindset that I may not be, winning in yet as a new salesperson, but I am doing the right things to get there, right? And so to breaking that process of closing a sale into the chunks and staying optimistic. These are the right things I can do today towards this opportunity, towards that relationship. So it
But
really just stop and think through it.
given that's the case, Denise, how can you then get from a 6 to a 9? If you can control your mindset, given your ID, what can you do then today to shift to a 9?
Well, that's a challenge in terms of just staying with the mindset rather than the external circumstances of closing a sale, right? So the mindset is maintaining the optimism and my trust and belief in that I'm doing the right things on a daily basis that will result in the right behaviors that will result in the right things. So I think it's the optimism, Paul.
So Denise, Amanda was just asking in the chat, what's your ID? So she can.
Oh, I'm sorry. It's 7627. Sorry. Let me change that.
Anyone have any suggestions for Denise on what, given her ID 7627, what she could do, given the issue of controlling mindset, to move from a 6 to a 9? Because given Julienne's point, we all can be a 9 when the day's going well. But if the power of knowing your ID is just, you might start the day and feel like you're a 6. And rather than waiting for everything else to change, what could a 7627 do right now to get more in stride?
So I think I would think about for you, Denise, what is even the smallest impact you can make? And it could be an impact on sales, it could be an impact on a person, it could be an impact on family, but what is even the smallest impact you can make? Because that can start bringing, for me, I'm an improviser as well. And I'm just looking at that drive right now, but it's like, what is the impact you can make in the moment that will make you feel like you've made a difference?
I really like that. Thanks.
Yeah, can I back that one up, please? Just as Pat was speaking, my thing went through my head was, you ask yourself, Denise, what's the best use of me here right now? What can I bring no one else can bring? And you find that part of you that's got a question about something, or you're wondering about something, and in there's going to be a perspective no one's brought yet. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Very interesting. Hey, these are great group coaching sessions. Can we keep this up, please? Keep going.
What a great idea.
What's the best part of me that I can bring to this situation that no one else can bring? That's pretty powerful. Thanks. I'm writing it down if you can't. That this would be a great training session on ID too, to have the masters, coach a targeted type, and this is fascinating. I'm learning from you, coaching me. So.
That's why we're here.
Yeah. Oh, just for me? Oh, thanks. It's all about me.
Yeah. What's your number now, girl?
I'm sorry, what?
What's your number now?
Oh, it's 7 or an 8. This is interesting. Huh.
So another thought, Denise, is I know you're attaching a lot of your fulfillment to the winning a sale, and if you were to get one, I know you can picture yourself being as high as a kite, that would take you to a 10. But that does mean that it's very much based on external factors, which you can't really control that. What the sale is, when it occurs. So if you look at what you can control, which is making a difference, how you show up and impact people. And if you do that and project that energy, sales, like at the end of the day, a sale is an opportunity to make a difference, for other people. And you can do that whether you're getting paid for it or not. Obviously, getting paid for it is important, and it can be very, uplifting and all of that. But we all get such a positive buzz from making a difference to people. If you just could find some people you could have an ID conversation with and make a difference through that coaching, you'd feel like you're fulfilling your purpose as well, because that's what a sale is ultimately going to fulfill for you. So just projecting that and making a difference more would put you back in control.
Right. Very helpful. Interesting.
I mean, I'm in that, we're a little bit different with our IDs, but I'm in that situation myself where I can get really, I can think I've got a sale and then it gets pulled from under me and it could be worth a lot of money that has big impact across the business. And if I let my fulfillment be affected by the sales, I'd be a basket case, So the sales are really important to the stability and security of the business. But what I've got way more control over and get way more fulfillment from is, how I'm showing up each and every day in every single phone conversation, every email, every interaction. Like, am I adding value and am I projecting my best self? And if that's where your focus is, the sales will come, but the impact will be happening each and every day. And doing that and getting the interaction from others, I think will get you up to a higher score and stay there more consistently,
Could I add one more thing on to that?
Right.
So one of the things that I do is I list 5 things that I'm grateful for. Because when I go into a state of gratitude, I remind myself of what I have instead of what I don't have. And the next step after going through 5 things that you're grateful for, and I pick silly things like, oh my gosh, I'm so grateful I have a good hair day, or something that makes me laugh as well. And then I ask for what I want. What do I want? And a question that really works for me is, wouldn't it be nice if? Because that question, wouldn't it be nice if, means that I can imagine, and it doesn't have to really be the absolute truth. It could just be me imagining, wouldn't it be nice if? And if I go through that question about 3 or 4 times, I really find not only what I want, but what is my mind sort of goes, here's what's possible. And then I just end with, so it is.
Thank you, Pam. Thank you. Great insights. So anybody else like to talk about, Julian, you're on mute. I can see.
Sorry, Amanda has put a great note in chat that I think would be good to share if you're okay to, Amanda, because it is focusing on the process versus the end result.
Yeah.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, sorry, I just got a cold, so I'm keeping myself on mute. But I think that one thing, sales, but also focusing on your ID, Denise, is I think it's important for you to have a list of goals that you want to achieve. And if they're focused on activity and that they are small goals, not something like something you're going to achieve in 6 months, something you can achieve every day, every couple of days, and that you can celebrate. And it's focusing on the activity. Eventually the sales come, but you're focusing on how many calls you're making or whatever, like what the guys were saying, making an impact, having a conversation with someone that might not generate a sale, but you're talking to someone in your community maybe. That helps you shift the focus on the end result to just a step-by-step, small goals, achievable. I don't know. I think I've written it better than I'm speaking it, so hope you guys can understand.
Thank you, Amanda. Thank you. Anybody else want to talk about their score? Either with it being up or if it's lower and you'd like to brainstorm something with the team. All right. Well, I know there's some people that have got some lower scores there than what they normally would have, and rather than call you out, if there's anything that I or anyone else on the call you think could help you just get to a different space, please feel free to reach out and take advantage of the brains trust that exists in this community. So, Guys, let's pivot to the topic of the day, leading and driving transformations. So one of the things I wanted to talk about today that we didn't get into last week was, what is a transformation? Like, we talk about change and driving change, but what's the difference with transformation? Because I want to offer that there's some very specific differences that are worth being aware of if you're involved in leading any of these or facilitating them in a coaching and consulting sense. There are some very specific things worth thinking about. And I'd maybe a good place to start is to reflect on your own life. Like, have you been through a transformation? And what was it? Why would it be called a transformation rather than just a change? Like, you might have changed house, you might have changed relationships, changed jobs, and that was a change. And there might be some other things where you go, no, that was a transformation. And what is the difference? Because this will give you some really good insight, I think, to how we can help our customers go through this, or even just other people in your circle. Anyone got something they'd like to offer up as the difference between transformation and change?
Well, to me, there has to be change to transform.
Yes.
Change has to come first, and then the transformation will happen. But ahead of the change has to be the vision and the purpose and the direction of what you're looking to change and transform. And I think if you have the vision and the purpose, the change and the transformation becomes easier.
Thank you, Pam. If you think about caterpillar to butterfly, is that change or is that transformation?
In my mind, that would be a transformation. It's changing from one thing to the other.
So what are you smiling for, Vicky? Got your own party going on?
No, it's just because in light of the client we've been with the last couple of days, I know where you're going with this, and I'm dying to steal your thunder, but I don't want to because it's your show. That's all.
Steal my thunder.
No, I'm not going to. You do
When
it much better than I do, so please.
Yeah, when I think about the change and transformation, for me, change is more, there are external factors that impact it, and transformation kind of comes from within.
100%. 100%. You know, so many people when they're going through change, and we're experiencing this right now with some customers, where they're almost waiting for everything else to happen to them and around them so that they can see clarity, they can determine what they're going to do. It's a little bit like what we were just talking about with being in stride, you know, whether or not you allow everything external to affect you or whether it comes from the inside. But there are two things really significant about transformation. One is it's an inside job. And even if it's the business that's needing to transform, invariably it involves something for the person to transform. And in a meeting we were in earlier this week, one of the people who'd done a lot of research in change said there's a one of the essential ingredients in getting real transformation to happen is when people actually journal about it, write it down, put their goals and their plans and so on down. And that cathartic experience is all part of the internal transformation that goes on with an individual. The second piece is that on the other side of the transformation, and this is a word, I hope you take this word with you from today's session and maybe reflect on it a lot, maybe forever, unrecognizable. The butterfly and caterpillar, it's unrecognizable. You can't say, well, it's still the same shape, it's still similar. When you think about people that go through a transformation with something like losing weight, for example, there's some people that could lose 5 or 10 kilos. That's a change. There's a lot of things still the same, but there's been maybe some changes, whether it's dietary or exercise. But when people lose a lot of weight, their entire life changes and they can truly be unrecognizable. The community they socialize with could be completely different. And there are people that will say, you know, my life now compared to where it used to be, it's so different, it's unrecognizable. And it's a really powerful word because it's similar to this idea of creating a movement instead of just driving change. It's a movement has an internal sort of calling about it. Transformation, if you think about it as a personal inside process, internal process, it has a real calling about it, and it's a personal experience. But I wondered whether it'd be worth sharing for anyone who's willing to on this call. What have you gone through? Can you relate to that idea of a transformation? I got you, Cliff. Personally, and maybe share what it was that when you measure it through the lens of being unrecognizable, what would you explain, Cliff?
Yeah, so I was thinking of this example when you were first asking, Paul, and a lot of people on the call know that about 10 years, 12 years ago, I had a brain injury. And the treatment for that is literally sitting in a dark room for 6 months. So the proverbial cave of meditation, no sound, no light, just sitting in a dark room while your brain heals. And I emerged from that a completely different person, unrecognizable to my ex-wife for sure. Also never played banjo again after that too. But it was that was definitely a real transformation in myself and the way that I viewed the world and the way that I viewed myself, because there was nothing but time to sit there and just look in the dark and just, see what you could see. So that was a very profound transformation in my life, I'd say.
Do you still carry it with you? You know, the lessons learned or principles that you embrace?
Almost every day. Almost every day. Yeah. Yep. I sure do. Yep. I mean, I don't need to share them here, but yeah, there's tons of them that I remind myself of each day.
Yeah. I think that's another element of it, that when it is an internal process, there are things that occur to you that are not just relevant to maybe what caused it or what it was serving a purpose for at the time, but there's this enduring legacy of value from it, that makes it even more worthwhile embracing the transformation as a personal experience.
Yep.
Thanks, Cliff. Thanks for sharing. Anybody else?
Well, Paul, I'll just say, when you said unrecognizable, I think oftentimes when people go through a transition and they truly make the transition, they can't recognize that they were ever at a place. So in other words, the butterfly would not recognize a caterpillar. It's like they don't, it's as if it never happened back there.
Have you had that happen, Pam?
Yeah, I would say some of the transitions I've made in working through things, I don't think I could get back to where I was. I might say and some people, depending on the trauma, they really say, oh, that never bothered me before, when it was like a huge issue. It's almost like they really moved past it, so it's no longer a reality. So that's kind of an interesting thing, because especially a lot of us are coaches here. That's why it's so important to measure, because you have to go back and test that and make sure that they know. It's like Denise saying, well, I'm a 6 and now I'm an 8. To Greg's point, he asked, what number are you now? That's an important thing to measure. Oh my gosh, I've come this far, because otherwise it doesn't seem like it's significant in some cases.
I think that recognizing piece is really, really important, because sometimes when you're down, when you're in the thick of it, when, things are hard, you don't also remember that you used to be up here and everything was good. And it feels like this is my current reality is the only reality. And that makes it a bit more difficult to hold on to that hope that things will change and it will improve. And whenever you do remember, hey, but I used to be up here, I should be able to get back up there. That gives you that, well, now I've got a pathway. Now I can do something about it. Now I can move in that direction.
Thanks, Jose. So the last couple of days, Vicky, Ian, and myself have been in a meeting with a customer going through a transformation, and we're right at the front end of it, designing it all, and we're involved for the change leadership process of it all, and we're lining up at least a 12-month journey. We're just looking at it as a 12-month window for now. It'll probably take a little bit longer. But it was interesting when we started talking about, defining the change and what needs to happen. The question was asked, this is the change leadership team. These are the people responsible for driving the change. Do you really believe that it's going to be different this time? And there was no real belief that it was going to be different this time. So as the change leaders, and I love this because this is the essence of what happens or why most change fails, is because people go forward treating change like a process when the people leading it aren't even solid about it in the first place. And that vibration will just permeate through the whole effort and derail it. And so to have that conversation up front about, do you really believe it's different this time? What needs to be different this time? What is a transformation? The discussion pivoted the whole thought process to it being an internal experience. And instead of the change being an external thing that the company is doing, and they're waiting, because that's often what happens, we're waiting for clarity, we're waiting for direction, we're waiting until decisions get made about what resources are going to be available, et cetera, et cetera. It allowed them to pivot straight away to a conversation around, if a transformation is about us becoming unrecognizable, and that is also a personal experience, what is it that I need to change and transform in myself to be able to be a representative of that transformation for the company? To Julian's point before, they got back in total control. They felt like they owned it. And at the end of that conversation, if you then said, so do you think it's different this time? It was like, hell yeah. Of course, like I just owned what I'm doing for myself. And it was a pivotal moment in setting up the change initiative. Those two things, thinking of the transformation as an internal experience, and the lens we're looking through is making it unrecognizable. Because change often is, the expression they're using is, change is often just a haircut. People aren't like, they're just doing a bit of a trim. They're not really looking to change the way they look. And that is the transfer. And most companies, when they're going through change, they're actually going through, what they really want is a transformation. But they don't really approach it, I think, with the significance of what the transformation represents.
Interesting that you said that, because I've had the experience where I've had a haircut, and then I've had the experience when I've had the haircut. And the difference being that it was in preparation for the wedding. And when I go into I'm getting ready for the wedding, I'm transforming into the James Bond looking suave in the suit guy. And it'll only be for, that night, maybe the next morning or the day before, but it's a transformation. It's like you're stepping into that role, that persona. You have to be your 10. You have to be the person that everyone's going to go, yes, he's here. And then you go back to, that was cool, nice photos, and enjoy the rest of the time. But same thing with a haircut. It's how you approach it internally rather than it just being a change. Because if you approach it like that, well, it's just a haircut. So yeah, I see that. I see that a lot. In fact, when I get changed for work, I actually do that. I go, oh, I'm going to this really important meeting. I'm not just putting on the work jacket or the work shirt. I'm getting into that mode of this is who I'm going to be. I'm transforming into that person. I'm not going to be the lovely cuddly guy that sits by the kids and on the lounge. I'm going to be that person who's going to step up and perform what has to be done. And then when I come home, I take it off and I transform back into the cuddly guy.
Thanks, Jose. Steve, I see you've asked a question in the chat. Do you want to maybe expand on that?
Yeah, once I find the mute button. Morning all. um, in the caterpillar to the butterfly, there was obviously some things that the caterpillar transformed or moved across to the butterfly, such as life. So in a transformation, there is potentially some things that are key to something. How do you choose what you're going to bring across and what things you're going to discard?
Well, I guess that's the conversation, but
Mm,
at least it's done with intent, so you're
mm.
not just carrying baggage for the heck of it, or losing the things that you wish you didn't lose. So I think of it, if someone was moving house, you go through and say we're taking that with us, but no, we're going to leave this behind. It's done with real intent, and in some cases, enormous care, because there might be things you don't want to take, but you don't want to just throw it on the scrap heap either. You might want to make sure that it goes somewhere that might be, where it's still valued and appreciated. So I think just taking the time, and one of the things I'm really loving about this initiative that we're doing right now is the time that the leaders are spending to really dig into those sorts of questions, Steve. Instead of
Yeah.
what often happens is they decide that we need to change, they appoint somebody as a lead, and they go, okay, it's yours now, you go do it. And it's just a process to work through. And it doesn't dig into the emotional conversations around what do we keep, what do we let go of, that typically need to be addressed.
Yeah, so if you so you get, I agree with your conversation, but then you'd infers that you have some idea of what you want to transform into. So you
Yep.
need to have some sort of vision, some sort of mission, some
Yep.
sort of really goal of what you think the business or what you need to be to make the business you want to be tomorrow.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
And you have that conversation.
Yeah.
And
Cool.
it's not always as straightforward as people think it is. Like if we're going to be the new business and the keyword, we're unrecognizable.
Yeah.
What does that really mean? And it's a conversation, and what are the trade-offs to get there? Are we really willing to do that? But I love that word, that word unrecognizable. It's a great North Star word to get the focus of the whole, team or movement on.
Yeah. Cool. Thanks.
You're welcome. Welcome, Savas. There's a face that I haven't seen for a while. Lovely to see you join us, Savas. Guys, one of the things we didn't get into last time was how do we lead? How do we set some of this transformation up? So I want to share a slide with you on what we have been doing that really has been working. So can you see this slide about a 3-day program? Is that what's come up? Oops, sorry, I think I've just lost it. Let me get it back. Can you see it again now? Great. Okay. So I just thought this, you don't have to use this. I just wanted to give you some guidance and some structure and point out some key things that are really working. So when we are starting with a team to enable them for a transformation, keeping in mind it's at least a 12-month journey that we set up, but we typically start with bringing the team together for a 3-day experience. And I'm really clear about the 3 days. It's not 2 days, it's not 1 day, it's not 4 days, it's 3 days. And these are senior leadership teams that normally would be pretty reticent about committing to something like 3 days. So the first day is basically the human day, the day where we focus on the people as individuals and as a team. So that's helping them basically understand themselves, each other, how to work better together, and how to understand the team as its own organism, like as a living, breathing body. What are the strengths? What are the vulnerabilities? What does this team need to be set up for success? And we dig into that through the course of a whole day. that sets you up. That creates a level of awareness, the psychological safety to have more authentic and vulnerable conversations. And it also sets up a different motivation. It sets up that motivation of, okay, so I can speak my truth. I can be more visible. This is going to be different because we've never quite shared like this before. We've never been this open. And when people have that experience on day one, they come into the business conversation that starts to unfold on day two with a very different mindset. And you'll hear leaders say, oh, if we're going to drive transformation, we've got to get a change in mindset. It's not just behavior, it's not just processes and systems and tools, but we need our people to change the way they think, change the way they behave, change the way they converse with each other. So on day one, that level of personal exploration and conversation with each other, that creates that dynamic. So when you come into day two, that's when we often, to sort of set off on a business conversation, there will be things that the leader or the team want to sort of talk about to just update and level set on as a business. But then get into this topic of what is the transformation? And the concept of a movement in our last class, so I won't go through it again now, but in the slides and in the class, we shared a video on creating a movement. If you haven't seen that video, I would tell you it's compelling. For me, when I saw it, it's a 2-minute experience. It's life-changing to see what can happen in a transformation. So I really commend that to you. And if anyone's out there on, doing this type of work, use that video. It's a really powerful enabler in a team, helping teams get unblocked from moving forward. A lot of teams will tell you when they get to this level of vulnerability and authenticity. Vicky, you'll remember this team we're working with. They opened up on the second day and they said, we're in a rut. We know they were sort of doing all the victim stuff on day one, but the vulnerability on day two, one of them said, I really think we're in a rut. We even know we're in a rut, but we need help to get out of the rut. I'm like, that's why we're here. And that's why we're doing what we did yesterday. And it's why we're about to dig into what we're doing today. And when you then show that video of creating a movement, like what we just said about transformation, it shows that it's an internal experience. So with that new sense of no longer the victim, but we're back in control and we can enable this transformation, now get them into solving some problems. So one of the things that you'll see here is we don't do any business update sessions where it's like function by function updates. The sales leader is going to do an update, the finance guy is going to do an update, marketing is doing an update, and puts everyone to sleep, which is what typically happens on day two. And that's why people don't like offsites. You get a group of people, I've said here for verifier teams, but really it works for all different shapes of IDs. You get them digging into solving real business problems that they previously wanted to avoid because they didn't think they were in control of. This lights them up because they find that, you know what, we can solve these problems. We were waiting on direction, we're waiting on decisions, we're waiting on more resources, but actually, if we now do this together and with a different mindset, it's shocking to them how much progress they make. Out of doing that comes, I guess, a set of realizations around how they need to keep working individually and together. So to then dive into what are the team norms? What are the operating principles? The ways that we need to do things going forward off the back of what we've just experienced for the last day and a half makes this very real and meaningful. Most people do team norms as part of the team experience on day one. And so they become very theoretical norms. Whereas doing it this way, they're doing it based on their new state of thinking, and off the back of having just applied it in those business problem solving meetings. There will typically be things that they then want to agree on to do as a team. So you note that down, and those team agreements might have even been coming through the whole day and a half. And then the part that's the magic, and I've only started doing this in the last few months, but this part's really cool, is when you pivot from the team agreements to have them spend time putting their own personal action plan together. Like, okay, this is what the business is going to do differently, but what am I going to do differently? And what puts the juice right into it is when one of our leaders said, and send them to me. And I honestly thought he was going to destroy it with that level of like transparency. It was a brilliant move because everyone responded positively, like, wow, are you interested? He's like, I'm totally interested. In fact, I'm going to commit to respond to every one of you. This was on the Thursday. He said, I'll respond to all of you by the end of business next Tuesday. And there were 65 people in the room. So he said, I want your personal action plans by close of business Friday. The normal response rate when you ask for something like that is 30%. Everyone says they're going to do it, but the typical answer is 30%. 78% of people sent their action plans by close of business Friday, and 100% had them in over the weekend. And he responded to every single one of them by Tuesday, as he said he would do. The change in that team by the end of that week, just because of what they covered in just day one and day two, we'll come to day three in a second, but then the commitment of the personal action plans to the leader and him responding has changed that team. Now, I will say that's a sugar hit, meaning if we do nothing else, I'm sure that will evaporate and everything recedes over time. It's not yet a one-way transformation, but it was quite shocking to me the change that occurred through the 2 days and that got really buttoned up by putting those personal action plans together. And then the important part, sharing them with the leader and the leader committing to respond. And what people were sharing, because a number of people copied me on what they then sent. And I'm like, wow. I mean, there's some really cool stuff in here that people are really owning. So as a process, we've now replicated this several times and it's worked equally well each time. That it's just been really powerful. So then you get to day three. Day two, you've got your agreements and action and personal action plans, but what's really missing is the deeper dive into the action plan, like in the team action plan. Like we've got these agreements, but how are we really going to do that? Like if we've agreed that we're going to meet once a week as a team, how are we really going to do that? And what happens if we don't do it? And if people don't turn up? And what happens if a customer meeting comes up and is which one's more sacred? So just fleshing out, there might be like 5 or 6 key action items and fleshing them out so that you look at them and go, right, how are we really going to do this? Who's really going to own it? What does it really mean? What are the trade-offs? And with whatever we come up with, given the ID makeup of the team, are we really going to do this? So for example, when they say we're going to do something every week, but they're an avoid complete team, what happens in week 3 when we're bored with the process and we all start sort of missing meetings because it's monotonous now? How are we going to, what's the mechanism to keep us accountable? And is it a person? Is it a thing? Like, what do we do with that? And it depends on the culture of the team. But just fleshing that out. And then once you've got clarity and alignment over what's agreed, and what's important here is what we would call a disagree and commit culture. So a lot of organizations talk about having collaboration, but they try and achieve collaboration with consensus. Doesn't work. I'm not saying it's never possible, but it doesn't work as a protocol. What does work is when there's the trust in the team that you can arrive at a point where you go, you know what, I don't agree. It's not what I would have done, but the team fleshed it out and they all agreed and decided, therefore we agreed. And as a leader, I will back this because I'm part of the team. So then it's a case of making sure that with what we're going to go and communicate to the broader stakeholder community, we're aligned on it. Because if you stop at the action plan and leave it to everyone else, I guarantee you'll have, if there's 12 people on the team, there'll be 12 different versions of what was discussed, what was determined, what was agreed, what we're going to do next, all the what ifs. But if there's a capture of what are the key things that we want to share that are also relevant to that audience, it's worth spending time on that. So that's really the process. Out of that, what you do next there's two things I think are important takeaways. What we've found is that when you're trying to drive a transformation, momentum is everything. And if you're going to both build momentum and also keep the team cohesive and aligned, you've got to work really regularly together. In the agile world, they talk about having daily stand-ups. You might have heard of that expression. It's a relatively quick meeting, anywhere from 15 minutes to 30 minutes maximum, where it's a quick check-in on where are we at, like what are we doing, what are we focusing on today, this week, what do I need help with, etc. This is a little bit different. Most people would say that they get together as say a leadership team once a month and wonder why everything derails. So we challenge them to get together 2 to 3 times a week, and knowing that if then they only get together once a week, it's still a big improvement on what they had before. But I've found off the enthusiasm of the 3 days, they really do meet 2 to 3 times a week for at least the next month. And that starts to really build momentum and drive real change. And then they start to see that the success that becomes, self-perpetuating. The other point in this, depending on the group that you've got, is out of the large group, like when we had 65 people, the leadership team was only like 10 or 12, but out of the other 55 people, there are a bunch of people that really stand out. That with the obvious change in mindset that they demonstrated, the credibility they have in the team, the influence they have across the team with what they say, their courage to express their opinions, but in a way that lifts the team. Those champions of both culture, the new culture you want, the new mindset, and the change that you're trying to reinforce, finding those people and harnessing and nurturing them and starting to utilize them as champions for the change effort, that's a really important mechanism. In fact, in this latest round of work that we're doing, where it's like a funnel, and all of the work is leading towards building this community of change champions who are going to be much bigger than any leadership team we can put together, but the real people are going to go out there and help build the movement. So that's a 3-day experience, followed by those regular meetings and then regular coaching of the leaders and of the team. And this sets up, we're just seeing this really work really nicely, but there are some specific things I've highlighted there in yellow, and I've tried to emphasize them in explaining it to you, that really are key to the success. So I'm going to stop there. I'll leave it on the screen for a minute in case anyone's got any questions or comments that you'd like to share or ask, so you can think about how you could maybe go and apply this yourselves, if this would be helpful to what you are leading yourselves.
Well, one of the things you mentioned earlier, which I think is so important, is the belief. And how did you go about that process of arriving at a place where the team truly believed in the transformation? Because I think that's a critical component.
Yeah. So see that section there on day 2 in the business conversations, and this isn't the only one, but when before that, like if you think about where they're at on day 1, it's that they're waiting. They're waiting for decisions, they're waiting for clarity, and they're waiting for what's going to be different this time. And as most people, you probably experience this yourselves, will say, you know what, I'm just taking the view that if I hold strong, it'll disappear, because these clowns come in here, announce all this change. They leave within the next few months anyway. I'm left doing the work. So I just sort of like bide my time and it'll go away. So that's the mindset of a lot of people. It's not that they're resistant. It's, to Julian's point, it's this lack of belief. And if change leaders don't show what's really changing and do it in a way where things are different, they're not going to have that belief. But what happens when they see it as an internal experience, Julian, and then they dig into that problem solving section on day 2 and realize that a lot of the problems they've been waiting for guidance on, they can actually solve themselves. And they see the group taking a different approach, and you start to call out what's different. That's what changes the belief. And I guess it solidifies it when they put their own, personal action plans together. So that process on day 2 was, maybe you need to see it to see some of the nuances play out, but that was really the pivotal experience. Vicky and Ian, I mean, Vic, you were there as we did this. I don't know whether you would want to add to what your experience of it was. Or Ian, anything you'd want to add to?
I think you described it sort of pretty accurately. It was just, I guess it was also the fact that they were prepared. This team felt that they were safe in that space. And so they were, when you asked them that question, do you really believe in the change? And I mean, the way you did it, you sort of did it very off the cuff. It was like, guys, do you really believe in this change? I was blown away, though, the fact that they were actually prepared to really put themselves on the line, and they were very honest around it. So
in front of their boss, right?
in front of their boss, yeah. So, which at the end of the day, I mean, she actually has delicately, if you like, or intentionally put together this team. So for them to actually have enough, I guess, trust in her that she wouldn't judge them, to be able to say what they, that they honestly didn't feel. I mean, for me, that was really the point, that they were able to then go, well, but once they talked about it, I just felt like that was where the change was, once they articulated it all. And the word unrecognizable obviously resonated with quite a few of them. So yeah.
Thanks.
It was just interesting.
I was just going to add, can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yep, cool. I was just going to add, I think the comment I made was that when we saw there was they'd put up what I call a corporate version of why we need to change. And it was almost, I think, to me, one of the piece of gold out of the day was that they actually, and Paul sort of pushed them on, like, but why do we really need to change? And it was almost like, put yourself in the shoes when you've heard this all before, and put yourself in your shoes. What do you want to hear? And that's when they actually there was a whole list of why is it really going to change? And actually, it was a very open and authentic conversation, and it took it away from just the corporate speak, and it actually made it real. And I think that's when they were all putting themselves in the position of how would I feel, if I heard this versus what they'd originally crafted. So it was quite important distinction, and I think a pivotal moment in the day.
But you know what, you're both referring to fundamentally the same thing. I think answers Julianne's question, is the creation of the safety,
Yes.
and the power of ID. When people feel like other people understand them, they've been able to speak to their truth and be understood and accepted for that, it immediately just like lowers the temperature, the fear temperature, and allows people to then speak what they're really thinking and feeling, even in front of their boss. And I'd say that was part of what started to drive the change, Julianne. The fact that they were able to speak their truth. I was saying to someone yesterday, truth and trust are in the same family. We talk about wanting trust. Well, you can't have trust if people aren't speaking their truth. But to speak their truth, you've got to have safety. And that's the power of day one and using ID for that.
I think because they articulated, Paul, I think because they openly articulated how they themselves felt, it was almost like they became, they then, I mean, this was my observation, because I sort of could feel it in the room. I think they got to the stage where once they articulated how they were feeling, it was almost like, well, am I actually on the bus? So it went from being just words, like, am I really on the bus? Do I really believe in that? I could feel most of them were actually having a transformation, going, well, okay, if we're going to lead this, we really need to believe it. So for me, I think they all had in that room, in that moment, had a bit of a transformation around, well, how am I going to sell it if I don't believe in it? And maybe some of them, well, I know that some of them kind of thought it was a pivotal moment. It was like, oh, I had reservations. I did kind of sense that this was a little bit the same, but I need to believe in it or I just don't do it. So, in terms of some sidebar conversations that happened later.
Yeah, and this is all at the front, guys, before any change plan has been designed, and the amount of it looks like all this time's been spent, but it's what most change teams don't do. And Greg, I remember you saying a couple of meetings ago, we all get an easy. You got to define when you want your easy to be. I hope I'm expressing what you said right. But you either put the work in up front and then it becomes easier afterwards, or you skate through that first part of really getting clear and bought into the change, you know, as the leadership team, or you're going to be fighting forever as you go through the journey and not succeeding anyway. So, you know, putting this type, if I went to a team and they wanted to start driving change and they weren't willing to put this sort of investment in up front, I wouldn't participate in it. I know it's not going to be successful.
No,
But the minute you can do this, it works.
curious. Sorry, I'm curious. You know, when you talk about under business discussions on day 2, you know, talking through and identifying the problems we're trying to solve, did that move to a conversation around what's it going to look like when those problems are resolved? Because to me, I would much rather talk about the problems which we're trying to solve and what's that going to mean for us than talking about metrics of success, right?
Yeah,
that's
not only did they tackle those problems, these are the problems that they were expecting that they couldn't solve. You know, that they didn't have the power, the resources to solve.
no, that's compelling.
And I remember saying to them, will you just take a leap of faith? What change involves is a leap of faith here. You've admitted that you're in a rut and that you know you're in a rut and you want to get out of the rut. We'll get you out of the rut. So I need you to take a leap of faith and trust that actually when you do this, you will find that probably 80% or more of the issues you can solve yourself. Will you just take that leap? And they did. And at the end of it, it was almost like humorous in the room. The fact that they tackled problems that had been on the table for ages, they solved them together in a way that they really believed in. They had practical outcomes for. They didn't need to go and get any approval from anybody else, and they got on with making the changes. You know, it was mind-blowing for me. And to see the difference in, like on day 1, I remember there was 65 people, so it was a big group, and it was very negative for me. I rang the leader afterwards and said, man, you got to just trust this process. I'm not sure how we're going to get through this, but I trust the process. It's one of the toughest groups I've worked with. And the change by day 2, by the end of day 2 was insane, like a pendulum swing from one side to the other through that process. So that's why I share it with you, because it was really profound. And I know there's subtlety in here of how you facilitate it and all of that, but there's some big rocks in terms of what we covered and when they were covered that I think could still be really helpful to you as you might think about leading your own, even if you're on a team going through change, just being able to take in a framework like this to how you galvanize together as a team would really be helpful. Guys, we're right out of time. So thank you for being here. This recording will be available shortly, as will the slides. So you can dig into them at any time if you want to go back and refresh. Otherwise, enjoy the rest of your day and week, and hopefully we'll see you next time. Take care, everybody.